raise to roar. We gotta raise. Hey, 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 people. We gotta raise. We gotta raise to roar.
I could cry now. The pain is so real, and it destroys people, and nobody cares. The system could care less about Kate Boccia and her kid, right, and how I feel. So the only way to help my son was to keep my sanity and make myself strong. I knew that if I let myself become the victim that the system was already pushing me towards, that I could never help him. So I ended up kind of like literally, I say it was 111 days after he went in, I just looked in the mirror one day and said, God, take this from me. I can't do this anymore.
Welcome back, my dear ones. This is Unbroken Chain, the podcast, and I'm Mara James. And that is an unstoppable force of a human being named Kate Boccia, who I had the pleasure of spending a little time with in Atlanta, Georgia recently. I've been working on a film that I will be able to say so much more about very soon, but I will say that through that project, I have spent a fair amount of time recently with people coming out of the criminal justice system after spending decades inside it and realizing how little fucks we give as a society for those people, even though we are ejecting them back into our midst with almost zero support and expecting them to, I don't know, reform, change, thrive. And in the midst of this project, I met someone else working on incarceration in the U.S. who connected me to Kate. And Kate has a deeply personal connection to this. As you'll hear, her son went to prison and really was just snatched into the jaws of the system, and the jaws, as she say, don't let go, and she got sucked in with it. And instead of, falling under the tidal wave of despair in the face of that machinery, she harnessed all the love and showed up in such a deep and big way, not only for her son and for herself, but for all the families of incarcerated people in this country, which is an enormous population. Almost everyone in this country is affected by incarceration. Well, everyone is affected by incarceration, because what I learned from talking to her is how deeply this broken, dysfunctional, abusive system permeates the fabric of society in so many ways. There's so much fallout beyond, the terrible conditions that happen inside prison walls. And I think it speaks so much to, again, it's a theme on this podcast, but how we value human life as a culture and as a country. And it really reveals where our priorities are, and it's not on people's humanity, spoiler alert. So Kate is incredible. This is really serious stuff, obviously, and she has so much conviction and humor and energy. And she's created an entire foundation, the National Incarceration Association, because she couldn't walk away from all the families that she met in her personal journey. And so many people reach out to her because they have no other options. You'll hear stories about that in this conversation. It shouldn't be that way. It doesn't need to be that way. And I really encourage all of you that are moved by this conversation to really take action, get to know this system. It's an illusion that those of us that are free in the free world are not touched by it. And I really think it's our responsibility to not only educate ourselves about the realities, but to change it, because it's toxic for all of us, and it degrades the fabric of society, which should be a fabric of love. I think that's what we're all striving for in our personal lives, is for our relationships, our work, our service to all weave a fabric of love. And we can't do that collectively while we treat people as disposable or as garbage that can be thrown away forever because of a mistake. I've certainly made mistakes. I think pretty much everybody in the world has made mistakes, and for those that are caught up in the criminal justice system because of it, that can't be the end of the story. Human lives and creativity are way too powerful, way too valuable for that. And we can do so much better. And Kate literally has the solutions. They are before us and they are within our power. So I'm going to let her explain the rest. This is a really incredible story. And gosh, this woman is an educator and an awakener and really the embodiment of ultimate love. So I'm really glad you're here, and I'm really glad that Kate exists. Come on in.
So my name is Kate Boccia, and what I do is I help families. I resuscitate families that are caught up in the criminal justice system. And I say resuscitate because that's what you have to do. You have to kind of save their lives. So I'm just a mom. I always like to start that because really all my work started just because of the love I have for my children. And my son, Daniel, was caught in the system at the age of 21. Prior to that, he had some issues that were what I thought being raised in the 70s were normal. He was playing around with marijuana, drinking beer, getting into trouble in high school. No big deal. He'll figure it out. Then took the path of the opioids, which we know the rest of that story. So ended up getting arrested and charged with armed robbery at a fight at a frat house at Georgia Tech. So that night I got that phone call, and this is where I'm getting to my point of resuscitating a family. When I got that call, Mom, I was arrested and charged with armed robbery. It was the night that my life forever changed. It's a call I never expected. Who expects that? Especially an armed robbery charge. So the questions started that day, and the questions that I had, I needed: where is he? What jail? How do I get him out? How much is bond? What is an indictment? What is a arraignment? All these questions started, and they never quit. And 7 years later, he's been home a year, but I still have those questions. They're just different. So the journey caused me to challenge the system a little bit because nobody was answering my questions at all. They were ignoring them and trying to shove them off to somebody else, telling me they'll call me back and never calling me back, all kinds of things. So started the journey with a bunch of questions and wishing I always say now, I wish I had Kate back then, because once I started learning the answers and finding the right people, it would calm me down. It would help my son calm him down. And I became this kind of mini expert in my own little prison with my sons, all these families. So
what was your experience of the system prior to that? Had you ever known anyone in prison or dealt with
not
that?
really. In the 70s, a couple of guys got caught up, I suppose, but my brother was a victim of a armed robbery when he was young, and I was a victim of an attempted rape when I was young. So I understood the victim side of things, and I grew up believing that, lock them up, throw away the key. They're all bums, treat them like what they are, and who cares? So that was how I entered the system. And it was a big eye-opener there. But I also knew when I entered this, when my son got after his arrest and we had to go to court, I thought, I'm going to get on my nice suit, and my husband and I were going to be dressed properly, and he's going to be my son. We're all going to look sharp for the courtroom because it's a court of law, and get down to Fulton County Superior Court at the crack of dawn and walk in, and thought, okay, nobody else doesn't know the dress code that I thought was supposed to be for court of law. Things had changed. I don't know. It was just weird. But and even in my mind, even the attorneys that were roaming around just weren't dressed appropriately. Almost, again, it's very surreal to me, like, what is going on here? So, but my original thoughts to the system was, who cares about those people?
They deserve it, basically.
That's right.
Yeah.
Till I became one of those people.
Yeah.
Changed everything.
Yeah. So is the first step kind of dealing with the bond system when somebody's arrested? What was your first engagement with?
Right. Well, he called us in the middle of the night, 4 a.m. or whatever, and now we're up trying to calling the jail and someone did answer, some sheriff, I suppose, and Carrie, our son's there, help. What do I do? well, you got to bond him out. What's the bond? Ma'am, he'll be in court. You'll have to wait to the magistrate or whatever the court is in the jail. So we finally called a friend who's he's a personal injury attorney, but that's all we knew.
Right.
And he ended up showing up in the courtroom, which was in the prison itself, in like the basement. It was so scary and crazy. Had to go through security, and sheriffs walked us down with a bunch of other people waiting for this. And then, so we're sitting in this little room. There's a big glass, and there's a judge on the other side at a bench, and obviously some public defenders, attorneys, and DAs in the room, and then all these inmates in their suits, shackled, sitting shoulder to shoulder tight, and it was cold too. Ooh. And the judge, whenever it was Daniel's turn, because there was stacks of files, stacks of people. Whenever it was his turn, something transpired. I wasn't clear because I don't understand it, and our attorney friend came out and said that he had a bond, $40,000. Yeah. So that was our first experience with a bond.
And that means he's free to go until a trial point.
Well, he wouldn't, unless we paid a $40,000 bond, he couldn't go, which we didn't have $40,000, of course, to put up for his bond. But I didn't know but there's these things called bail bondsmen, and the signs are everywhere around the jails. So our attorney friend said, yeah, call a bondsman. So we did, and it's 10%, $4,000, but you don't get that money back. But that's just to guarantee the bondsman puts up the bond for you. Somehow, though, we heard about something called a property bond, which I'd never learned of, never knew. I don't know who told us. But luckily, we had enough equity in our home to put a property bond, so we didn't have to come out of pocket $4,000. And he got out about 8-9 days later out of that Fulton County jail, which is just the most horrific jail. Ugh, it's just awful. They call it Rice Street.
Why is that?
It's on Rice Street. But it's just a terrible, overcrowded, and just they eat bologna sandwiches 2 times a day. Oh. Yeah, it's just a mess. And
these are people that haven't been charged with anything. Well, they've
correct.
been charged, but they have not been found guilty of anything.
Correct. They're just waiting. And so the whole bond thing, I mean, we had the ability to do that, but if you don't have the ability to bond someone out, you sit in there. And the way Fulton County is, these larger counties, it takes forever. Even with a speedy trial, you can be in there for a year. I've seen people lose apartments, lose jobs, lose cars because of not being able to bond out for even small misdemeanor offenses. In Georgia, I mean, you can go to jail for failure to pay a traffic violation. So if you didn't pay your traffic ticket and you didn't show up in court, a warrant goes out for your arrest, and they'll come get you and arrest you, put you in jail. They won't just say, so I had a young girl that happened to her, and it was Friday when it happened. We always say, don't go to jail on a Friday because nothing's happening until Monday. But it happened to be Christmas weekend, too, or week. So she ended up staying there for 11 days. She lost her car because she couldn't pay her car payment. It was already late as it was. So there was all these things. So bond is... Georgia's been, we've really been working on this bond issue. It's... You can't... all it does is tell poor people that you can just sit in jail. We don't care. You don't have $100 for your bond.
And it criminalizes poverty.
It does. Mm-hmm.
Which is funny because debtor's prison is supposedly not a thing anymore, but it's not funny.
No. Right. Well, so this whole system, if you just drew it like a cartoon, it's hysterically funny. But unfortunately, those cartoon people are real. The Thelma and Louise going off the cliff in a cartoon isn't so... It's kind of easy to digest, but in reality, it's absurdly funny at times. So that's the beginning of the journey, just the starting point of an arrest and a bond hearing.
So what the bondsman pays 10%. What happens to the other $36,000?
They put up the whole amount.
Okay,
and they just keep your $4,000. So once the court system situation's done, then they get their $40,000 back.
Got it.
But I don't get the $4,000 back.
Got it. Wow.
That's a fee. 10%.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So who can lose $4,000?
Right.
I mean.
Right. So then, how much time between then and the trial?
So it was that was in November 2000. 2011, and the trial was October 2012, so just under a year. But during that year, my son started spiraling down with his addiction because this armed robbery charge in Georgia carries a 10-year mandatory minimum sentence. And his attorney was who we met, the jailhouse lawyer. We didn't know who to hire, so we hired this guy. He kept saying, "Oh, they'll offer a plea deal, they'll offer a plea deal," and time was going on, and they weren't. And the attorney was getting concerned and saying, "Well, we're going to have to go to trial." And so my son was starting to spiral down and was starting to use, and then he gatewayed over to heroin. Yeah, and one night during it was in April, between the arrest and the conviction, 4 girls came over to our house and brought drugs, Roxy's, Oxy's, heroin. Daniel was on a curfew from his arrest, so he wasn't allowed to leave the house. So we were sleeping, Frank and I. They came over upstairs, and all of a sudden we hear this big ruckus, and we go out, and the 2 girls had overdosed. They did not die, thank dear God, because who knows where my life would be. But my husband had one, my son had the other one. They were carrying them, and I called 911, and they said, "Don't take them anywhere. Put them down." We were in the garage by now. Put them on the garage floor and start CPR. So we're doing CPR in our pajamas on these 2 overdose girls, and the cops came, and the paramedic, all the people came, and the other 2 girls were fine. They stayed. Their parents showed up later, but they never even came in to talk to us. But anyway, another talk show. So anyway, cops came in, and they searched the house and found a little bit of paraphernalia. So fast forward about a week, the girls were in the hospital for several days, told the cops during many, many interviews that Daniel might have injected one of them, but they didn't have any memory. And they did identify who they got the drugs from, but nothing happened to that. So another warrant was put on my son because he's now, he's already an armed robber, of course, charge. So they called. I had friends in this, because it's a neighbor. I've been here a long time, that heard that were in this system, said that they heard there was a warrant out for his arrest. So I called down and I said, can he turn himself in on Monday? This is a Thursday, because my elderly dad was coming to town, and I didn't want to disrupt him. And okay, Mrs. Boccia, just Monday morning, first thing, because he was being charged with some misdemeanors. So anyway, Thursday, Frank and I went out to dinner, and I noticed a weird car at the bottom of the street, but I didn't think anything of it and left. Came home from dinner, and Daniel's not here. His car's here, his phone's here, his dog's here. We knew that the cops came and got him. So they did. They came to our home, from my son telling me later on that they came to the home, the front door, three of them with their guns drawn, and came into the house. The dog, we had a pit bull at the time who was injured. He couldn't get up, thank heavens, because he likes to run up to people. And I'm quite certain they would have shot him if he had charged at them. So they took Daniel, they arrested him, brought him to this local city jail, and then decided to transport him back down to Fulton County Jail, Rice Street, which is where he was months earlier. They charged him with 2 misdemeanor reckless misconduct. And so I think I bring that up because that's a taxpayer thing. Like, why did we even transport him to the big jail? He could have stayed right there in the little jail. That's 2 sheriffs to transfer, and the gasoline and the time to and then the jail itself, the county jail, now has to intake processes. So it's just ridiculous. So this is this nightmare.
And how old was your son?
He had just turned 21 before the arrest.
Wow.
So he was, young man. So then we fast forward to October 22nd, first day of our trial, because no plea deal ever came. And went to our courtroom all buttoned up again, like ready early, and he's in his suit and we just looking good. So we go to court, the first day of the trial, lots of stuff is happening, and not really clear on, it's just so, I can't even explain it until you've lived it. Everybody knows everybody, the public defender, the district attorney knows our attorney and the judge, and they're all jokesters, and the sheriffs, and they're up there doing this thing, and so the trial goes on, and we never got the plea deal, and the judge kept asking the district attorney, is there a plea, and what is going on here? I've seen you come off far worse charges. So let me back up. My son was arrested and charged with armed robbery. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't steal anything, and he had no prior convictions. His co-defendant had a plastic PVC pipe because they were laying around in the yard at the Georgia Tech HEO or whatever house, one of the frat houses, because they were building floats that day. It was Georgia Tech game day. So they got into a fight, and there's a video. I do have a video of because there was cameras on the frat house. So the video showed the fight. That showed that Daniel and the victim testified that he didn't hit him and he didn't have a weapon, but the other kid had the PVC pipe. So he hit the co-defendant hit the victim with the PVC pipe, and the victim slumped down, and then he took something out and he threw something on the ground. Daniel, my son, bent down, picked up this item. It was a wallet. He opened the wallet. He closed the wallet, and he went to walk away, and they turned around and he threw the wallet back at the kid. So that was the armed robbery.
What?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
That's real. I tell kids all the time. It's no joke. So
I don't even know what moral to take away from that. Like, I don't even know how would you change the behavior in that situation to make it
right. I mean, I never sugarcoated what they were doing. None of them were behaving. My son maybe he was trying to rob him. I don't know. Daniel doesn't have any recollection of that night. They were all high as kites. But so the judge, like I said, told the DA, I've seen you come off far worse charges than a PVC pipe and a pocket knife, because Daniel had his pocket knife in his pocket when he was arrested, which his grandfather gave him when he was 10. But he was on school property, so that's carrying a weapon on school property.
Wow.
So all that said, the trial went on, and it ended on the third day. It was a Friday. We go back to the courtroom. The closing arguments take place, and the jury's out, and we're walking around outside in just a nervous wreck. I mean, I can't even function at that point. Matter of fact, Daniel's last meal in the free world was at a food truck down at... We thought it was horrible that day, but in hindsight, what he was about to eat for 6 years was pretty darn good. So the jury's called back in. So the courtroom, the court of law, there's always the sheriffs there. They're protecting the courtroom, and they work for the Fulton County Superior Court, but they're sheriffs. So they're protecting the courtroom. So during the trial phase, there was always 2, 3, 4 sheriffs in the room at any time. But when the jury came back, my heart is starting to race. I swear, I'm feeling that PTSD moment kick in. When the jury was called back in, and we were called back into the courtroom, there was now sheriffs lined up, probably 4 to 5 on each wall, 3 or 4 in the back of us, 2 behind my son and 2 behind his co-defendant. And so it was this change. It was already scary, but it was so ominous. It was just like so scary in that room, and just didn't understand why all this was like this. What was going on here? So then the jury came back, and so it's all I can remember from that moment on is we, the jury, find the defendant, Daniel J. Boccia, guilty. And that was the first charge of armed robbery. So we knew that second that guilty came out that he was going for 10 years to the door, we call it, not coming home for 10 straight years. So the horror that's, so my son, he was sitting there when they said guilty. He turned and he looked back over his shoulder at me and screamed, "Mama!" And they grabbed him and they handcuffed him. And I screamed, and my husband screamed, my mother, our whole family. And then the sheriffs all hear, like, ma'am, you're going to have to leave the courtroom. There's no disruptions. And again, that whole, like, what are you talking about? I don't even understand what's going on. What just happened? So then the co-defendant, same thing, guilty. His mother's just a basket case over here. So we leave, and they twist them off, and that's the last time I saw Daniel. That was October 24th, 2012. I did not see him again until April 2013, as he whisked into the system. He whisked into the system, and so did I, right along with him. So he was down. They brought him back to Fulton County Jail. They put him in that night, put him in his jumpsuit, and Daniel was suicidal. He was so over distraught. Now, the sentencing didn't take place that day. It was waiting till a week later. So during that week, I had to do everything in my power to keep him calm when he would call. I would just sit by my phone and just wait, because you don't miss that call. You miss that call, I can't call him. I can't do anything. So I just would pull it together and keep him, tell him to breathe and teach him some kind of breathing techniques. And I would say, and I said it every day for years, Daniel, you're not going to be in there 10 years. It's not even possible. I will do everything in my power to fix this thing. So a week later, we go back to court. Daniel's not with us now because he's in custody. And they bring him out in the orange jumpsuit, shackled. See your son shackled is so horrific. They ended up, the judge she was angry about the whole situation. And she would say, your hands are tied, go to your legislators. I don't have any say in this mandatory minimum sentencing. But then she did proceed to sentence him to 15 to do 14 years, which meant he had to do 14 instead of the 10 that we knew. And we never to this day understood quite why, but we were beyond numb. 14 years in prison. So we went home, and I don't have much recollection, neither does my husband, of this period of time between that week of the conviction through the holiday season. It was they took him from the jail on November 19th, so right before Thanksgiving, and whisked him off to what's known as Georgia Diagnostics. It's the classification facility for the state of Georgia. All the men go through there to get classified to see what level the security they'll be at and what things that they have to do with them. But it also is where the death row inmates live. So it's a pretty, tragic place all around. I mean, so they took him on the 19th. I know because he called and said he was going. And that's, every time he called and something like that happened, then it happened. It was like they were taking me too, just dragging me, kicking and screaming. So you couldn't visit him at Jackson. We call it Jackson. It's Georgia Diagnostic Center, but we call it Jackson for whatever lingo. A lot of lingo I learned over the years. Yeah, I didn't want to learn it all. But he got there, and he did write me. I have a lot of little letters he wrote. The first one was on a little postcard. I said, Mama, this place ain't no joke. I've seen people stabbed. I've seen people thrown off the tiers. Okay, he's only been in the system for a couple weeks. So he did have a counselor that took to him, and she would bring him out from the dorm and let him hang out in her office and give him books to read. So that felt like somebody, saw something that I knew existed in my son. So then on sometime in March, he ended up going to, he got shipped out. We call it shipped out. So ship dates are on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the middle of the night, like 2 a.m. So we knew any Tuesday or Thursday he was going. We didn't know where. They're not going to tell you where. How you find out, for me, is I watched the Georgia Department of Corrections website because I knew that I could see him there in the picture at Jackson, but I wouldn't until I see it switched to a new facility is how I would find out.
So there's just no communication?
No, it's changed just a little bit now. It's a little bit different, but they can't call you. They can write. By the time you get your letter, who knows what's taking place.
It's 2019. Like, if they wanted to.
Not in prison, silly. It's 1974 there. So off he went they finally shipped him out to Autry State Prison, which is in Pelham, Georgia. You can touch Alabama and Florida. That's how far southwest it is. It's below the gnat line, as we like to say here, which means it's good and hot and lots of gnats. The facility was not air conditioned. None of them are in Georgia. Only medical prisons are air conditioned.
What?
Yeah, in Georgia. So we're in southwest Georgia. Through the summertime, his dorm could get up over 100 degrees. They would they'd try to provide him with ice. The guys would buy these cheap little plastic fans for like $60 that would break every 3 months, but they would stand by their little fan. So yeah, that's where he started his 15 years in prison. So we literally, the pain and the destruction that it did to myself, personally, my husband and our family, his sister, his grandparents, the pain was so god awful. It's as if he died. And I can only go back to say that when I started really realizing that he was still alive and the kids were dying, and in the Sandy Hook massacre, I realized that I could still hug my son, even though it was in a god awful situation. At least I had some way to see him, right? So I kind of had started getting more peaceful, but also realized I needed answers like, He wears glasses. He's very, very, poor vision. And he was actually wearing contacts in the free world, but I don't let you wear contacts in prison. How are they going to get you? So his glasses were so beat up and old. And I called down to the prison to say, how do I get him? I need to get him glasses. What do I have to do? Oh, well, let me, I'm not sure. Let's put you through we'll have the counselor call you. Nobody did. I show up at an event where there's people there from the Department of Corrections, and I went to the medical. Excuse me, I'd like to get my son glasses. How do I do it? Well, he'll get glasses there. When? And what do you mean, how? I have them right here. Can you just take them to him? It was ridiculous. So that's when, like I said, these questions, like, I just want to get my son glasses. What do you mean you can't answer that question for me in a way that makes sense to me? So it never ended. The questions never ended. So eventually we got him moved closer to home to a little better facility. He was fairly stable. He'd been in about a year now, fairly still, ups and highs and lows, all of us. But I was getting stronger, and I was realizing that the only way to help my son was to keep my sanity and make myself strong. I knew that if I let myself become the victim that the system was already pushing me towards, that I could never help him. So I ended up kind of like, literally, I say it was 111 days after he went in, I just looked in the mirror one day and said, God, take this from me. I can't do this anymore. And I had gotten fired from my job just prior to that. Because I wasn't functioning at work. So I'd never been fired before. Went on unemployment. Nobody takes note of that, but I went on unemployment. I'd never been on unemployment in my life. And the reason I got fired from my job was a direct result of my son's incarceration, because I couldn't function. I couldn't do my job, and so they let me go. So those are some of the ramifications that people don't think about.
How was that manifesting in you? Were you having panic attacks or?
Yes, I was depressed. I had never been depressed, and I didn't even understand depression until that, but it does hurt. It's just like your physical pain throughout your body. I could barely get up. I would sleep until 10, 11 in the morning. I remember, this is really weird, but my son had given me a pair of pajamas for Christmas the year earlier, and they were gray flannel. So it was wintertime, and I would wear them after he went in, and I would just sob, hysterically sob. And when you just, all the stuff's coming out, and you do this, and it gets kind of
crusty.
So the sleeve of my pajamas just would get that, and I wore them the following year, and I was so much healthier. But when I put them on, I remembered that.
Wow.
It was so profound to me, like the pain. I could cry now. The pain is so real, and it destroys people. And nobody cares. The system could care less about Kate Boccia and her kid, right? And how I feel. So standing in line one day, after I pulled it together and realized I had to help my son, and I had to do it by taking care of myself. And I ended up, I was standing in line so the prison line, it looks like a Walmart line anywhere USA. You never know what you'll find in a prison line. People waiting to get in to visit their loved ones. The line's long. It's one of those days when you pull up to the Walmart line, you're like, oh, God. And you're in a bad mood, and the person in front of you is an idiot, and over here's, or you're in a really good mood, and the whole line's laughing, right? The line is a weird thing until you put it in perspective of the line in a prison. So people don't think of a prison line. What does a prison line really look like? Looks like any line anywhere, because in that line are old people, young people, children, teenagers, every color, too many teeth, not enough teeth. I mean, you name it. It's in the line. In fact, one person in line with me one time was Evander Holyfield, because his brother lived with my son in the same facility. So again, the line, what is the line? So I started thinking about the line, and I thought, who are these people, and don't they all feel the way I do? Of course they do. So I got to make a few friends here and there, but we would just meet in the line, and we'd go into visitation. You're not allowed to talk amongst each other in visitation. No talking. Okay. Because they don't want us talking. They purposely want to keep families apart from each other, because that's just not, they're not going there. So I often said, the Department of Corrections has my name, my full legal name, my social security number, my driver's license number, my street address, my license plate number, my phone number. But they don't know who I am. They don't know anything about me. They just have all these numbers of mine that belong to me. They're my numbers. They identify Kate Boccia. But they don't know me, and they don't really care to know me. But I also realized that I was the most important person to my son. And so if the system wasn't allowing me to be purposeful with my son, then that was not helping the system at all. That's actually detrimental. So in this long line, I thought, we all feel the same way. We're all trying to get in this absurd situation, trying to get through this door, one person at a time, one poor correctional officer, underpaid, overworked, tired, frustrated, just like all of us. So I just thought, gosh, if there's 31 prisons in the state of Georgia, just state prisons, that's not jails or detention centers or juveniles, they're just state prisons, 31, and there's always, let's just say there's 100 people visiting every weekend. That's 3,100 people that have to feel the way I feel. We know that number's considerably higher because not everybody goes to visit. Some mothers can't get there. They're too far away. They don't have their car broke down. They have to work. But I thought we could probably reasonably assume that there's 10,000 families in Georgia that vote and pay taxes and do business that feel the way I feel. And that number is obviously staggeringly low. So that's when the NIA was born, when I just thought, why does nobody care about the families when, in fact, we are the most important people to those people that live inside these prisons? And so I started talking to people, and I got higher level with Department of Corrections because purposefully I wanted to, remember I said I'm going to get my son, I used to tell him every day, now he's going to do 15 years instead of 10. You're not doing 15, you're not doing 10, you're not doing, I don't know how long you're going to be in there, but you're coming out if I have to dig you out. So just hold on to that thought. So I kept very laser focused. That was my goal, was to get my son out of prison. And as I did that, I just kept showing up places because I would read. Now we were at the beginning of the criminal justice reform hoopla that went on started about 7 years ago, but we all remember, our state, Governor Deal, was phenomenal in the work he did and was noted as one of the top states for reform work.
What did he implement?
He redesigned the whole probation and parole to a Department of Community Supervision. He started the Governor's Office Transition Support and Reentry. He created the Georgia Council for Criminal Justice Reform. It was an appointed council that met and studied policy and legislation to push one way or the other, raise the age from 17 to 18, the issues. So it was really well done and well organized and got Georgia on the map, and we had a lot of momentum. So it was ripe timing for me to because people were showing up. Politicians were showing up because they knew that the limelight's here, so we got to show up. So I was showing up, and I was asking these politicians questions about, how do you feel about mandatory minimum sentences? Would you hire, Mr. Coca-Cola, an armed robber? All these questions. So I was showing up, asking questions, and getting higher level and getting to the right people. And I finally got to meet the Commissioner of Department of Corrections in person in a private meeting. And just to talk about, wasn't always to talk about my son. It was to talk about what I was learning as I was going along. I would always start with, if you could sprinkle magic fairy dust and open that gate, I'll take them with me. But in the meantime, we have some problems here that we need to solve. And I have some ideas for you. So he liked me enough that he let me kind of continue to give him some small little tidbits of ideas. Okay, sure enough, knew something happened, new appointment, that commissioner's out, he's over to the Pardons and Parole Board, new commissioner comes in. I'm like, shoot, I just got that relationship built up. So I went to a big meeting at the Criminal Justice Reform Council one day, and the governor was coming in to say thank you to the council or do his little 2-minute spiel. And meantime, governor walks in and he says, and I want to just introduce you to our new commissioner of the Department of Corrections. And Kate Boccia, nearly like, you'd have thought I was at Disney World trying to get to Mickey Mouse. I mean, I was jumping over people and tripping and falling, and I shook his hand, and I put my son's card in his hand and my business card, and said, Commissioner Bryson, I'd love the opportunity to meet with you. Now, his chief of staff was standing there, and he knew me from the... And he says, well, Miss Kate, I'll be happy to arrange that for you. Reach out to me next week. Okay. That's how it works around here, I guess. You just jump over people. So got that meeting with Commissioner Bryson at the time, and just he and I in his office, he actually gave me a cell phone number. He said, you call me if you have any problems. He said, I don't understand why we run this prison system the way we do. Every prison's different. It should be like a Chick-fil-A. You go to Chick-fil-A, it's run the same way. Why is it, and he had a lot of questions. Well, come to find out, he didn't come out of corrections. He came out of another government agency. And so he was thrown into a different,
he's learning like you were.
Yeah, like, woo, how's that? What? What year is that? Why do you not have? I don't understand. So we built a relationship, and I told him that the family piece, I said, we need to have an ability for the families to come sit before you and your higher level people and talk about issues and concerns. So he said, Kate, write it up. Tell me what it looks like. So I developed a small, tiny little mission and vision and a little overview of the Citizens Advisory Panel. Didn't put my name on it anywhere. I wrote it as if he had written it himself. And they took it on, but they changed the word board to panel. So it was Citizens Advisory Panel. But everything stayed the same. There was about 12 or 15 of us on the first go-around. This was in 2015. I was one of them. So it never happened anywhere else in any other state. And who's doing this? He's sitting down. But so it was good. It was interesting. I was on it for 3 years. We helped kind of develop the family day, develop just different things. We saw some minor changes to the visitation. We got changing tables for the babies in the visitation rooms. We got the hours extended for visitation, just some small things. But more importantly, we gave a space for the correctional officials to understand that families were not here to fight with you, because that's that us against them mentality. We're here to work with you, because in fact, there's only 3 people that matter: the person that committed the crime or the offender, the system itself, and the families. And all 3 of those have to work together, but stay in their own separate lanes, but connected in the center to the common goal. And that's to have that person come home and stay home. And the families can do that if we're allowed a space to do that. So the NIA was kind of coming into my head at that time, the National Incarceration Association, which is the nonprofit I formed in end of 2016. And it was just kind of me and a couple other moms, and met my business partner. He's a brilliant political strategist, and he'd helped us brand and develop our vision and our mission and our 3 areas of focus. And really, before you know it, Kate Boccia is like instead of me saying, can I meet you, Senator? It's like, have you met Kate Boccia? People were doing that. It was weird, but I hadn't stopped. I hadn't let up for years. I mean, I didn't work. I didn't sell a house. I didn't have a job. I made 0 money, and every penny I did, I sunk into the NIA to help get that thing off the ground. And so but it worked. And so I've got solutions, and I don't want Department of Corrections to ever think I'm just this whistleblower trying to cause trouble. We already know what the issues are. All the hands on the contraband. We can say it out loud, people. Everybody knows if you Google prison corruption, you're going to get 10 good pages of Google pages of different articles on prison corruption. Who's at fault? I think we all are. I think corrections is at fault. I think families are at fault. I think the offenders are at fault. I think the business leaders, the churches, the society as a whole, because we ignore it. We know that we have contraband in prisons. We know we have drugs, cell phones, cigarettes, gangs, but we don't do anything about it. We just say, as one warden told me, well, Miss Boccia, there's always going to be cell phones and drugs in the prisons. And I thought, Warden, I think that's a rather defeatist attitude. I think we can think differently. Because I know for a fact that Walker State Prison does not have any drugs, contrabands, cell phones, or gangs. Because that's a faith and character-based prison that's driven by good men and good families that want to do the right thing. So I know it can happen. We just got to do it. Quit pretending, this is, I get fired up.
No, I see why you get things done.
Yeah. So all that said, I ended up meeting with my son's district attorney, and I did the same kind of process. I got to him finally after many meetings, and he'd see me. One time I saw in the newspaper that the commissioner of my county was going to have a smart justice panel. And I thought, not without me, he's not. So I called and wrote and emailed and called and wrote and emailed. And finally, I got a formal letter asking me to be part of this Smart Justice Advisory Council for our county. And I did it because I knew that the district attorney would be there. So I go to the meeting, and that's a long table down at the county headquarters, fancy schmancy. I call them all the mucky mucks. So they're all lined up. There's sheriffs, there's district attorneys, there's solicitor general, there's judge, there's police chief, all the who's of what's not in my county that run the criminal justice system. Some academia were there because they were going to figure this thing out. So we're doing these introductions. I see Mr. Howard, our DA, who I'm trying to get to know him. And he's kind of looking down at his paper or phone or whatever, and we're all introducing ourselves, and I stood up. I said, my name is Kate Boccia. I said, I'm not a .gov, I'm not a .edu, and I'm not a .org. I'm just a .mom. And I see him just kind of peer up over his glasses at me like, who is that lady? Fast forward a couple of years, I had several meetings with him in private. He would joke that don't give Kate Boccia your cell phone. And if you don't answer it, she's going to come knock at your door. So if you do give her your cell phone, just answer it because she's going to come knock at your door. That's what I got known for. I'm going to knock on your door, and you're not going to be able to say no because you can tell me, just answer the question. I might not be happy with the answer. Just answer my question. So that's being said, I got him to consider a sentence modification for Daniel. And Daniel's attorney at the time was like, Kate, what are you doing? How are you doing this? I'm like, what do you mean, what am I doing? I'm getting my son out of prison. Isn't that what I'm paying you to do? I mean, the appeals aren't working, so we got to get something else here. So it was called a joint modification of sentence reduction for a sentence reduction. So they agreed. We went before the judge again, and she agreed and to reduce it to 6 years from 15. Yeah. So he came home last October, a year. He's been home a year now. I know. It's amazing. Wow. But it just showed me that you can't give up. You know, families can't give up, but it's hard not to, but you can't. You got to fight with every ounce of your strength and let them know that you're not going away. And my son was, the system, the people that he lived, the prisons, they don't like him so much because of me. They're the officers that worked there and the staff, they were worried. Like, what is she doing? One time I like to acknowledge all the officers, and I call them officers. Notice I say that. People call them guards. They're not guards. Guards guard banks and Macy's. Correctional officers are officers of the law. So I'd like to give them that respect. So whenever I would go visit whoever was at the place letting us in, I'd say, good morning, how are you? And I'd say, thank you so much for taking such good care of my son with no money and no resources. I really appreciate what you do. And they literally would be like, what does she mean by that? They were so confused. I would write them thank you notes when I felt, handwritten, thank yous for what you did. And I went to visit one time, and the one officer said to me, that was the nicest thing anybody ever did for me. And I thought, well, that's sad because you're a nice lady and somebody should thank you. And then one time I sent an email. I would send emails to the warden about things I was upset about. But so I would always do my emails very proper. And in the subject line, I would put whatever the issue was. But this time I just put an officer's name, young lieutenant. I just put Lieutenant blah, blah, blah. Don't remember his name. And I knew that would get his attention. And I copied the commissioner. That's the big boss. Dear Warden Holt or whoever, I just wanted to tell you this. Lieutenant so-and-so is an amazing young man. And he always makes our family feel welcome. And he's so respectful. And I was being very sincere because I wanted them to know that they have good officers in there too. So off I sent that, and I go to visit, or Daniel calls me a couple days. Mom, what the heck did you do? I got Lieutenant so-and-so gave me a gallon of bleach, which is like gold in there.
For what?
As a thank you for your mom sending the thank you note.
But what do they use the bleach for?
Oh, to clean their stuff. And to bleach is, you're living with 60 men in a dorm. Bleach is very, very important. Yeah, sorry you didn't know that they need bleach. So, and when I went to visit and that lieutenant was there, he came up and thanked me for being so kind. So they're people too, they're and the officers live in the prisons for 12-hour shifts in that same dark, dingy, dank environment that my son lived in. They're there for 12 hours a day, locked in there too with their clear bag of stuff, I mean, we can't ignore them, but we do. Ignore them all. Maybe they'll go away.
Wow. So, I mean, you've literally every part of your life, it sounds like, has changed, and you've funneled your energy into this mission, which I imagine a lot of people are not able to do or don't choose to do.
Right.
Because it shouldn't be this way. It shouldn't take a mom completely upending her life to do this. So how do you see the system perceiving its constituents? Like, what is the function of the system at this moment?
Well, I think that, the constituents are the families. us, me. I think that the system in Georgia is definitely paying better attention to us and realizing that we are forming now, and it's not a forming to be this angry mob, but it's really forming to go under the gold dome and say, we're here. We got to change these laws. We've got to change these laws. We got to stop mandatory minimum sentences. We got to get rid of the death penalty. We got to raise the age. We've got to bail reform all the way. We got to talk about voter disenfranchisement. We have to fix this stuff, because all we're doing is creating another generation of people that can't be hired, can't find housing, can't do anything. Medically, they're ill. So the system, I really believe with all my heart that all corrections and Department of Community Supervision, which is the probation piece and parole, the people that supervise once they're released, it's so overburdened. They all know they're tired. I can see it. They're worn down. We just had a 10% budget cut in the state of Georgia. How do you take 10% away from the Department of Corrections? Where are you taking that from? There's nothing to take but the few things that our last governor implemented. Are we going to take those programs away? Because people will tell you in the free world, why does that guy get a free education when this guy out here doesn't? Well, 95% of these people are coming home, whether you like it or not. That's irrelevant how you feel about them. Don't you want them coming home with some life skills? You don't want a man that's been in 20 years that doesn't know how to work a smartphone, because that's happening today. And if you don't care about these people, do you care about your own wallet? Because the cost isn't going to go down. It's $180 billion every year. That's just corrections. That's not even talking about the collateral fallout of me going on unemployment, children in foster care, people losing their homes and businesses. So there's other layers to it. A little example of the financial impact to communities. When Daniel was first sent to prison, my husband and I both stopped behaving the way we used to behave in such a profound way that first things first, our money. We were, prior to all this kind of demographics that our zip code and our age and our blah, blah, we had these spending habits that we were marketed to by all the different things. We'd buy a new car every 2 years. I'd show up at Target and get my beach towels in the summer and my, Christmas stuff in the winter and all that stuff, right? All that stopped immediately. Many reasons. One, I didn't care about all that stuff anymore. Two, my money had to go to my son. Attorney's fees were astronomical. His commissaries, books, buying him clothes, extra things, driving to the prison, vending machine, that cost us probably $300 to $500 a month. And at times we didn't have that extra money to spend, much less, but we found it. So we took it from where? From our community. We didn't go out to the restaurant and have dinner. We didn't go to the Georgia Aquarium to see the fish because we had to drive by it to visit our son on our day off. So those are little pieces. So you can there's a lot of people, I've been, kind of accused of my white face, allowing me more privilege. I don't deny that in the least bit. It did get me a lot more things that other people of color couldn't get or can, but it's more difficult. So, but if I take my story and I put it into my African-American mother who lives in rural Georgia, whose son's been in prison for 10, 15 years now. That entire time she's doing the same things I'm doing. She's putting money in his books, putting money on the phone, sending him a package if she can afford it. She might be poor to me, but in her mind she's actually okay. But that extra income that she used to be able to go to the local fair or whatever, that buy the... whatever it was, her church, to give, to tithe, whatever it was, she had to stop because that money, she had a choice to make, with the extra income. So we don't think about that. So if for the naysayers out there who cares about this mess, well, the financial cost cannot go down. It can only go up because we have three things happening at the same time. Aging inmates. Google it. What's happening with the inmate population in the United States of America? It's a very slow and steady upward trajectory of aging. And that's not going to change. It can't change. They're coming unless we stop putting people in. But we have these mandatory minimum sentences that keep people in, so they just get older, older, older. The correctional officers, Google this too. They are starting to age out because of retirement. So if you think about when we build all these prisons, those officers are starting to retire now. Wardens are retiring, regional wardens, all around our country, because that 20-year, 30-year mark is hitting us from when we built these prisons and these mandatory minimums and these lock them up, throw away the key mentalities, tough on crime stuff, war on drugs. It's all starting to happen at the same time. So that the aging inmates coming out, old, homeless, uneducated, the officers going out on pensions. Last I knew, that was public money. Mm-hmm. And then thirdly, the facilities themselves are old, they're antiquated, they have very poor technology, which is nearly impossible to not do anymore. Mm-hmm. The basic systems, the plumbing, the infrastructure, the major systems components they're in horrible disrepair all over the country. I mean, I know for a fact in Georgia, but I can promise you there's not one state that can say, oh, our prisons are all fine and they're perfectly, maintained. They're not. So where's that money coming from? Mm-hmm. I don't think, Home Depot and Mercedes-Benz and UPS are going to slap a nice big, like the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. They're not going to put any money on this thing, are they? Well, they should. We should have our business. We should have the Atlanta Rotary stepping up to the table and say, what can we do as the biggest Rotary in the country, second biggest, with every CEO, Fortune 500 mucky muck sitting in that room every Monday talking about stuff.
Can you speak a bit to the element of, because I know people talk a lot about private prisons now being incentivizing sort of aggressive policing and all of that. Mm-hmm. Are you talking about, are these mostly private prisons, or are these?
Georgia has only 4 private prisons out of the 31 prisons. So there's 3 owned by one group, Core Civic, and 1 is owned by Geo Group. It's, there's a mixed bag, but the privatization of the prison system definitely is a moneymaker. But again, it's not for the taxpayers. They're not making money on this. Who's making the money? So an example being Georgia has what's called Georgia Correctional Industries. That's the for-profit arm of the Department of Corrections. And they run the food and farm and they do other kinds of manufacturing of street signs and clothes and other things. So there's a dairy farm that one of the prisons, that's who the inmates that live at that particular prison work at the dairy farm. So they go milk the cows for free. We don't pay our people in Georgia. The inmates don't make any money in Georgia. So they wear their state uniform. They don't give them special clothes. They don't give them OSHA steel-toed boots either. They don't follow OSHA standards. Wow. They don't have to. Wow. Nobody cares. So they go milk the cows, and that milk is then sold back to schools, hospitals, and prisons. Now, that farm is doing well. What about the farm down the street that doesn't have that free slave labor? And they're not able to compete with this thing. But again, more importantly, we're selling that product back to the state-owned institutions, schools, prisons, and hospitals. But where is that money? Like, that's a lot of money. So so the privatization of prisons and all that, we can't have that because it does create that ability to, because nobody cares about these people. So it's very easy to discreetly grow a wealth around this. So I just find it, I think we need to pay offenders that live put them to work and give them money. So when they come out, they have a check. And you know what they get when they get out of prison in Georgia? They get a $25 gift card and a bus ticket in their bag of garbage. And I say that purposely because it's in a plastic bag, a plastic garbage bag. So here, take your garbage, take your $25 and your bus ticket. See ya. Good luck. That's what happens. Now, is that corrections' fault? No. That's society's fault because we allow that. We don't give them, how about some clothes? Oh, that's right. He does get a pair of khakis, a pair of tennis shoes, and a T-shirt. But if mom's not waiting for him on the other side of the gate like I was, then, he's not getting anything.
And then what happens with getting a job afterwards? Or even in your son's case, what is he facing now? So
nobody will hire an armed robber. And it's sad because he got an opportunity where he met a very high-level executive. And the company he owns is something my son's very good at and wants to do, but my son was afraid to even tell him about his background because he knows it's got to go through HR, and it's just not going to happen. You can't get it. It's really hard to find a job when you have a felony conviction, especially something violent, one of the 7 deadly sins. Forget it. Now, nobody's going to go to him and say, well, back up. When he first got out, he went to Target for a seasonal job. He got the interview. He was so excited. He nailed the interview. He came home, Mom, and it was just a seasonal, just to kind of get him kick-started to figure out what he's going to do. Nothing, no callback. Got a letter in the mail from HR. Nope, due to your felony conviction. A seasonal job at Target. Have you looked at your employees lately? I mean, come on. Those people just never got caught. So it's nearly impossible. He does have a good job now. Because I'm determined to remind him and surround himself. And again, the way the world is shifting, there's too many of them out there that look just like my son. It might be a different color or a different age, but they still have the same thing. You know, this baggage. I've had people turned down for jobs in housing that had 20-year-old convictions 20 years ago. One old lady, she was real old, and she lost her apartment for whatever reason. She had to move, and they wouldn't let her rent this place. Why? She's never done anything wrong but that one nonviolent drug offense 22 years ago.
Not to mention that she served her time for it, and that's supposed to end.
There's no such thing as an ex-con.
Wow. Yeah.
Once a convict, always a convict. Yeah.
So at the beginning, you were saying that you kind of had this, I think, conventional society outlook on people that are in prison of like, they're there, they deserve it, whatever happens to them, like we can kind of lock them up and throw away the key. How do you, obviously it's been humanized now because these are real people,
right.
But what is the function of the criminal justice system in like a functional society?
So it's so simple. Oh my God, I could do this tomorrow if anybody would let me. It's really what we have to do is we have to do an assessment at sentencing. So what that means is that prior to a judge banging a gavel on a sentence, they have all the information they need to say what will fix this human robot that's gone awry. What will correct the criminal behaviors in this person? We can fix people. Now, we can't fix everybody, just like we can't fix all bad dogs. Well, at least we give bad dogs a try. You know, we try. So with a human being, once the person's convicted of a crime, then the sentencing should be based on how long will it take to correct your behaviors that cause you to do that crime. And what tools are needed? Do you need treatment for mental health, substance use? Do you need anger management? Do you need some soft skills training because maybe you just never learned anything as a kid in the streets? So you need, what is the prescription to fix the human robot? Because if your smartphone breaks, there's a prescription to fix that. Everything can be fixed. So if you use prison as a tool to really rehabilitate them, yes, and make sure that the criminal thinking that they had changes, and we can test that. And when they go back before the judge and they've completed all their classes, and the judge says, voila, you can go. Or maybe you're still acting a fool in there. You know, that's going to happen. Well, you haven't done what you were supposed to do yet. You're not quite ready to come back home. But when you are, we want to make sure that you're ready and your skill sets are there. So we can test that pilot so easily someplace if a system would let us. But it's complex.
I'm curious if you have specific perspective on the addiction piece. I mean, the opioid thing is like its own whole podcasts for years, but what would have been intervention, do you think, that would have helped Daniel?
So that's so simple too, because what I realized that everything that my son needed for help was actually in my backyard. I just didn't know where it was. I couldn't find it. Now I Googled and I got all these sketchy kind of rehabs all over the country, send them to Florida. Don't call one of those numbers, by the way, because they'll call you night and day. But the resources were the high-level resources, the master addiction counselors that understand treatment, or the other family members that understand support. So that was there. I just didn't know where it was. It's not there in rural communities. That's the problem. But in my community, it was. So resources are the most important thing. And how does a family get to the resources? And how do we connect what's working to the problem we're trying to solve? So that's part of the NIA's mission, is to help connect those resources to a problem that we're trying to solve. Recidivism is nothing more than recycling, human beings through the system. Here's a powerful statement that we've coined. Every social ill in our country ends up wrapped in a life standing before a judge. It's all it is. There's nothing more than that, because if you sit in these courtrooms and watch, you'll see the same thing over: drug abuse, mental health, chronic homelessness, of sexual violence, physical violence, lack of education. It's the same thing over and over and over. When are we going to stop and just start saying, let's go to the neighborhood. The little boy that just kicked the teacher, let's go check him out and see what's wrong with the little boy. So it's, We got to stop the patterns and the cycles of behavior. It sounds so huge and big and complex, but it really isn't if we just start someplace. That's what I want. I'm to my dying day, I'm going to start the project. I've got the Coca-Cola people on the phone. Come on, y'all it's going to be called the Coca-Cola Restorative Justice Center. I keep saying Coca-Cola because actually I'll tell you a story. I had a dear friend who I never met in person, but we became very close friends over the phone. He was a high-level VP at Washington, D.C. Coca-Cola. And he really cared about criminal justice, and he really cared about people. He was a wonderful man. And one day he called me, which he never called me. I always called him, I'm trying to find money. I'm trying to find resources and stuff. So he called me one day, and I was, I'm not going to say his name. What's going on? He goes, well, Kate, I need your help. Okay, what? He said, well, my wife's brother is getting out of prison next week, and we don't know what to do.
Wow.
I'm like, you're calling... They call me Mama Kate, by the way. You're calling Mama Kate in Georgia. You're a high-level VP international with Coca-Cola, and you're calling me for help? Because you don't know what to do with your own brother who's coming home from prison. Voila. I'm on to something big. Mm-hmm. Why is he calling me? He could have picked up the phone and called any CEO in this country, but he didn't have anybody to call. And so that's the resource thing. That NIA becomes this operation that says, call us. We can help redirect you. We'll find you the master addiction counselor. You have mental health and you're in the criminal justice system. We'll find you an attorney who specializes in criminal justice and mental health, in the criminal defense and mental health, because that's what you need.
Mm-hmm. So you feel like there are systems in place if they can be, the people that need them can find them. You feel like there are solutions.
There are. And our county's got, the city of Atlanta has a lot of really big, really positive momentum projects. Pre-arrest diversion initiative, the Partners for Home, which is a housing model. United Way is part of that. That's a public-private thing. There's $50 million in that fund right now for housing. So I see things happening, and their collaboration is definitely more. It used to be everybody stayed in their silos, and there was like, I don't want to tell you anything because it's my project. Nobody would share. Even government agencies and nonprofits and faith-based communities. I want to. I'm the only one that does this. Mm-hmm. No, we all do something, but we got to know exactly what is, as if we're building a rocket ship. Somebody screws the wing on, but he's not the guy that's, putting the IT in everybody's got their little role. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But connecting them so we can put that man on the moon is what we want to do. Mm-hmm. They're there. It's all there. Mm-hmm. The people are there. The passion's there, but we got to pay people. We got to stop asking our churches and our faith-based community to take this mess that we caused, and stop asking our nonprofits that have a heart for this work and say, take this mess that we caused. Mm-hmm. We have to. Literally. Pay people to do the good work. Mm-hmm. Coca-Cola, UPS, Delta. Who else?
Yeah,
they're all here in
They're
Atlanta.
the ones with the money to. Yeah. What has your relationship with your son been like through all of this? Amazing.
We've all grown. It's amazing how we've grown as a family in a way that you could never understand. I've challenged my friends over the years. My son is, at the time he was 21 through 27, I guess, however old. My daughter's a couple years younger. So I challenge my friends who have kids that age to go into a room, make sure that it's a hard, either metal chair or plastic chair in a cold, gymnasium. Let's think of a gymnasium with a little table in between you and your loved one, your child. And you only have a bag of quarters. You can bring 2 rolls. And they keep your car keys and your driver's license at the front. So you just have your bag of quarters to put in the vending machine to buy disgusting, overpriced vending food. It's not like the vending food that you get at, Quick Trip.
Oh, really?
Oh, heck no. It's nasty. And but then sit there and talk. No phones, not a pen and paper, not a book, nothing but talking. So when he first went in, I thought to myself, what are we going to talk about? I said, we'll have to all read the same book so that we can discuss the book. That was my big idea. Well, little did I know we'd never stop talking. Some days we would go in and we would laugh, we would cry, we'd get mad, we'd tell jokes, we'd be quiet. Sometimes we'd just sit quiet and nobody say anything, but it was okay. We were just kind of in a moment. And So then it would be, his sister came and she'd go visit him by herself, and they got closer and closer. And then Daniel started really reading, like what 22, 23-year-olds really reading a book, a big hardback book, that's deep, like Malcolm X or something, like just stuff that. And so now he's talking about politics. He's talking about world affairs, and he and his dad are having these deep conversations. And then I got to a point where I didn't even visit when his dad would go, because their conversations were like sometimes like, Mom probably shouldn't be in the room here for this one. But we would just talk. And so even now, it's just different. It's changed us. What's important? Family and, your community. And when you make a mistake, own up to it. Just, but fight for what's right for your family, and don't give up. So that was the biggest takeaway. And so Daniel and I are really close. He's anxious to kind of get a little more involved in my work and learn his voice, because he's got a pretty powerful story that I think the millennial generation in the next one down will want to learn, because when I tell it, and there are young people, they go, wow, that could have been me. Yes, it could have. My generation, we didn't arrest people. We just came, the cops came, and we'd say, don't arrest me, just don't tell my father, don't take me home. We were more afraid of our parents than we were of the police. The police were like our friends. It was just a different generation. It's just not like that now. We arrest and lock people up for nothing. So it's not the system isn't a joke. And I have families who've they'll say to me, well, they only had a pellet gun. Well, if you're going to do something that scares another person, you risk getting caught up in the criminal justice system, period. This is my son. He scared some guy that night. He was acting stupid. The system got him, and it doesn't let go ever. So, but we're a better family. And the NIA was born, and that was a profound need. We'll be launching a video on December 3rd. We're going to do it at the state capitol during the annual Christmas tree lighting. Doesn't that seem fitting?
Wow.
December 3rd.
You're showing a video?
Yeah, I don't think I'll be able to show it there that day, because but I'm launching the campaign for it to show we call it the NIA CPR model. It's a CPR stands for conflict mitigation and personal interactive rehabilitation. It's a long mess, but we resuscitate a family one issue at a time. And we save lives because of it. So the model has been developed. We're getting ready to launch a short video so people can understand it, and then we'll be going for funding for 2020.
Wow.
Yeah.
I feel like what you're talking about is like seeing people as individuals, which just like systems, institutions at scale, I just don't know if they can handle that, or certainly without, funding in the right places. But they just don't understand how to deal with
and that's
individuals.
Why they need the NIA. So we feel the blows. I get a phone call from a mother, or I always say mother because that's what I am, but it is mostly mothers and women, and they're hysterical. They're crying, they're angry, or they're just out of, when I give them that space to be that, and then glean out of that long tirade of emotions that were coming out of their mouth, I figure out what the real issue is. Some of the issues we can't solve here. Like it's not that department or it's not that space. But you want to get your son transferred to a different dorm because he doesn't feel so, whatever. So once you calm them down and let them know that you're hearing what they're saying, and you're saying back to them, okay, so I heard all this, but right now I think this is what we can deal with. Now when I present an issue to the right person, they're not getting all that baggage with it. They're just getting the question. I always go back to the question that we need an answer to. We need something resolved. So now it relaxes the posture of the Department of Corrections, or it could be a district attorney's office. It could be a sheriff, a jail. But we're relaxing the family. So now the system can see that, okay, it's a buffer. So that, because they're going to get it. Ask any district attorney. I've asked any sheriff, any judge, any nonprofit, do you get calls from desperate families? They'll all roll, yes, like roll their eyes and like, because where do we go? When you're in the criminal justice system, if you're in a hospital, it's a different thing, but there's still questions, but at least you actually have a place to go when your loved one goes to the hospital.
Right.
My loved one just got in a car wreck and he's at the emergency room. I have questions. They actually care and they're nice and help you, because it is a car wreck that we get into, our person, and we just need help.
And so much more transparency.
Yes. I mean, don't be so clouded. This is, again, you said it's 2019. This isn't 1974. Forget trying to pretend that we don't know that. I always say, you know that I know that you know I know, right? Because I know what goes on. We all do. And so let's just move forward, fix it. And I know how we can get that 10% budget. I can probably get them a 20% budget cut. Close some prisons. You know how we do that? We let some people go home. Nonviolent drug offenders on mandatory minimum sentences, elderly in hospice care, people that are wrongfully convicted, identify them, get them out of there. And then when we reduce the population, we can now have the proper amount of correctional officers working in the facility because we didn't even have to let anybody go because we're 30% understaffed as it is now. So if we close some prisons and move some people around, that'll save you, Governor.
Kate Boccia for president.
That's right. Yeah, too crowded field.
Well, I wonder if you have any advice for people that maybe haven't been directly affected yet of how to sort of shift their thinking about this. Because I think recently I was saying I've been working with these guys who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s who are coming out of the system. And yes, they're telling, incredible, horrific stories about what goes on in the prison, but a lot of them want to talk about their childhoods and what happened to them that they see as the seeds of. And it's just completely changed my thinking about, humans in context, of course, and where those choices come from and intergenerational trauma. So how, as, free people, how should we be working to change this or to be involved? Or
well, first, we call it the empathy gap, closing that empathy gap. How do you be empathetic with somebody who murdered somebody? That's nearly impossible. So it's really more about understanding the facts of what's those old men, what's the reality of what their childhood is. Looking at a human being, one human at a time. You'll see stories and you'll start learning stories. And I've met people that did some horrific crimes and they're never coming home. But does that mean they're not redeemable? I mean, I believe in redemption. I think everybody can redeem themselves. So if they have to stay in prison the rest of their lives, because they committed a crime so horrific, that can be okay. I have no problem with that. Again, I said I was a victim of an attempted rape when I was a young girl. I understand fear. But when we have people in there that have redeemed themselves and have proven for years and years and years that they're doing the right thing, then it's time to let them go. Because when we do give them the right tools and opportunities, the data speaks for itself. So to be out here in the free world, understand the impact to you is real. We are all included. We are all included in this thing called mass incarceration. We will pay the price whether we choose to ignore it or not. So I would say learn about it, Google it, study it, and go visit a prison. Go down to your jail. You can tour the jails. A lot of jails. Go to a big gnarly jail like Fulton County Jail. They do have tours from time to time. They'll let you. And see these people that are living like animals. If you went into a dog pound and saw that, you'd be out coming home like, oh my God, the poor dogs. We got people living like that, like animals in cages, and it's just not right. So there's people like my son living in there every day that made a mistake and a poor choice that should have some opportunity to do his time well and to come home and stay home because we said, welcome home. We've missed you. Be empathetic, care about, just meet somebody too. Find one story. There's a couple books. I wish I had them off the top of my tongue, but that have changed some people when you really read these stories. So like you said, childhood trauma, sexual abuse in children. It's how dare we? I mean, how dare we ignore that? How dare a judge and a district attorney not allow us to talk to that person about what happened in your childhood? How dare we even allow it get to that far that has to stand packaged in a life before a judge, right? They're coming home, and they're coming home to your neighborhood. So you want them to come home healthy and happy and whole, or do you want them to come home the way they went in? That's your choice.
Thank you. Thank you for who you are. I mean, and what you're doing. It's feels like lifetimes of work that you're doing here. And
yeah, we'll be writing a book. It's going to be called Love Mama, a mockumentary. Perfect. Exactly. Yep. I got it all in my head, but it's a good story. This is a story of that plays out in the American family, and it has for generations now. So we have to understand that there's a lot of moms and wives and sisters out there that are hurting. And just ask somebody, if you know somebody, ask them if you can help them. And if you know somebody that needs the NIA, join NIA.com. Check us out. Bring your families. We need tens and thousands of us. We need an army to vote and change laws.
Yeah, how are you doing now? I'm sure having your son home changes a lot, but
yeah, this year was amazing. I never, so normal. Like I almost took almost the whole summer on a sabbatical and went away and literally was going to work and didn't do anything. So I lost a lot of momentum for the first half of the year. And I almost thought I was done. Maybe I'm just done. But then all of a sudden, I think I must have got a call from a mother, and I just realized it can't be done. In the meantime, I've got 3 grandchildren. My 2 babies were born this year. They're 10 weeks and 12 weeks old now. So that brought new joy, but it also brought new concerns for what we're doing to our system and what's going to happen, what we're handing to my grandchildren and all of our grandchildren. This financial beast that's just coming down the hill, right? Just rolling down that hill and getting bigger and bigger. So the babies made me realize that Mama Kate not going anywhere. So I just have a couple questions for you. Governor, President.
Well, thank you.
Oh, thank you. That was awesome.
So much.
Enjoyed that a lot.
I'm telling you people, anywhere, we gotta raise. We gotta raise to run.
Thank you for being here, beautiful people. I'm always so grateful that we share this space together, and please find Kate online at joinnia.com. You can also find me there too, marajames.com, and on Instagram at marajames. One quick thing, the holidays are coming, which can be an insane and triggering time for most people that I know. And I just want to remind y'all to be kind to yourselves and to assert the boundaries that you need to during that time. And I also wanted to say that holidays can be particularly stressful for families dealing with incarceration. And I wanted to point you towards an organization that I've been tangentially a part of for the last 3 years, in that they hooked me up with a prison pen pal, my friend Tanisha. It's called SWAP, Behind Bars. The SWAP stands for the Sex Worker Outreach Project. And very much like NIA, it's a social justice network dedicated to the basic human rights of people facing discrimination, but particularly because of their association in the sex work industry, which is a whole nother podcast, of course. But a big part of their work is connecting sex workers who are behind bars with pen pals, sending books. I think they've sent something like 20,000 books to people who are incarcerated at this point. And during the holidays, you can sign up to send Christmas cards to inmates as well. And I've put the link to that in the bio of this episode. I highly recommend you do it. Throw a little party. You can request them in increments of 10. So if you're having 10 people over, ask for 100, make it a creative project and infuse some love. And consider getting a pen pal. That's been a really beautiful part of my awakening to the realities of the criminal quote-unquote justice system, and has really developed into a really sweet friendship. So check them out as well. All right. I love you all. Thank you for being here, and we will hang again next week.
We gotta raise to run. We gotta raise to run. They tell me, oh man, like a poor man. The red man thought he had all he needed. Oh yeah. But after old man father died, they tell me no one paid attention to lies about it. But they tell me God killed. God sent an angel to get lies about it. So the rich man died too. They tell me how been few for it. After the rich man died and went to hell, they tell the rich man said, Father Abraham, send light to my brothers and tell my brothers, don't come to this place. Hey, hey, people. We gotta raise. Hey, hey, hey. We gotta raise. You must treat your sister. You must treat your brother. We gotta raise. Hey, 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 people. We gotta raise. We gotta raise to run. We gotta raise to run. Just because you got all those fine clothes, nice home to live in, you think you have all you need. Hey, 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 people. We gotta raise to run. We gotta raise to run. We gotta raise to run. Hey, 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 people.